carry on bringing us to speed with what is happening within the Karamoja sub-region as far as cattle rustling is concerned. We also do have Godfrey in Singure, I believe, on the line, who is also ready to engage us on what is happening within his jurisdiction. We shall get to him a little bit later on. But I do have Gawaya Tegule, who is joining me right now on set to talk about the continued assault on bail by the president. Why is the president adamant to let people who are grappling with murder cases within court to actually be granted bail in that regard? Is it an assault on their constitutional right? That is a no-brainer. But then it's taking center stage in this country. The president says it should be an eye for an eye. If you do kill someone, yes, you shouldn't be wallowing in jail for the rest of your life because the other person, you didn't send them to jail for the rest of their lives. They are actually 6 feet under, and the same should be done to you. The president is literally recalling for the death sentence to be taking center stage. Something that is unfathomable within this 21st century. Gawaya Tegule is joining me right now. Fiona Wall will join me later on for this conversation. A very good morning, Mr. Gawaya.
Good morning.
Indeed. Despair is written on your face. Does it pertain to the subject at hand, the fact that the president is actually calling for the removal of bail for murder suspects?
Not despair of that kind.
Indeed.
I'm basically more concerned maybe about the president.
Yes.
I think I fear for him. I think the sound bites coming through are not reflective of a man having a good run just now. I think somebody ought to advise the president. As a president, you want to sound a certain way at all times. You want to sound like a father of the nation. You want to sound like you're taking the nation forward. You want to sound like you belong to the realm of progressive Democrats on the continent. You belong, even at the most basic, you belong to the realm of decent people, of right-thinking people, people who think things should be done a certain way. I don't think this is what we're seeing from the president. His sound bites right now are very, very disturbing. I fear for him. Yes, my heart really bleeds for this man. Something is not right. Because when a leader is going in the right direction, he doesn't talk like that. When a nation is headed in the right direction, the leaders don't speak like that. If you see that happening, then something is not right. You see, the issue of bail is one of the sacred rights in our constitution. Indeed. Because it is based on Article 28(3) of the Constitution that a person, 3A, a person accused of a criminal offense is presumed innocent until proven guilty, or until he's proved, until he pleads guilty voluntarily. Not under duress. Not under duress, like our good friends at the CMI like to handle the suspects that fall into their hands. So this is the foundation of the institution of criminal law, that the moment you appear before the judge, the moment you appear before the magistrate, at that level you are innocent. You're presumed innocent. It doesn't matter whether you've done it or not, the law presumes you innocent. And then it charges the state to prove you guilty. Or sometimes it invites you to plead guilty, and in the sense that, well, if you'd like to work with us and enjoy the benefit of the law and whatever, then we shall give you a reduced sentence. As a matter of fact, yesterday, when all this happened, I was in Kigo. It's a small world. Indeed. I was in Kigo. We had gone there basically as Christian lawyers fraternity. And we had gone on what we call a plea bargain session, where prisoners who would like to plead guilty voluntarily are educated about the benefits of pleading guilty. Yes, reduced sentence, you're showing remorseful before the court, you're showing that you have learned your lessons, I'll never do this again. So we sit down with prisoners, we educate them, and we tell them, you don't have to do this, but if you feel like you want to work with the court, just to not waste cost time, and half the time, people commit these offenses. Half the time they commit them. Half the time they really want to a way out of it. They just want a way out of the situation. They want another chance in life. So plea bargain then offers you this benefit that you can work with us as court, and then we give you a reduced sentence. That's what we're doing in Kigo yesterday. Yes. So I go out. I think I had to meet somebody in Kajansi. So I drive out of Kigo. Now, all this happened apparently when I was just about to get back. So when I got back in, I think after talking to the prisoners, we had now the chief magistrate delayed to come of Entebbe. So that's why I said, let me sneak out, get to the bank, and then come back. When I came back, you know, I was at full speed, like re-driving towards the prison at full speed. Then soldiers, not soldiers, prison officers, guns drawn, jump out of the bushes and point guns at me. I'm like, am I missing something here?
They thought you were orchestrating a prison break.
You know,
single-handedly.
I had never, I mean, we go to prisons all the time. Yes. In the morning we're in Kitala prison, then we came to Kigo prison. So I was like, what's going on? They came guns pointed, several of them, they came out of the bushes. So I jammed my brakes literally, the car screeches to a halt, and I'm like, Afande, what's the problem?
Indeed.
They said, identify yourself. I said, identify myself now. I was here since morning. Why didn't you ask me to identify myself when I came in the morning?
Indeed.
Because I've been here all morning. I went off to get something. Say, okay, but your lawyer said yes. Are you Segerinya's lawyer? I said no, because I was like, okay, this is about Segerinya.
This is about Segerinya.
Because as I was, you know, driving, I met a pickup. No, it was a van of journalists with cameras. I was like, why are these guys here? So it didn't strike me at that time what was going on. Kumbe, they had just taken Segerinya, and then the judge was still recording the leftovers, and then these prison officers were like, whoever is coming in here better be prepared. So I was like, what is all this about? Because, I mean, if Segerinya has been granted bail, why can't he go home? But then I remember that
Alan Sewanyana last week had just been rearrested by the UPDF at the premises of the same prison. So that could also justify the increase in deployment at the same venue.
And I think it just tied in because court was pleased to grant Alan Sewanyana and Mohamed Segerinya bail.
Indeed.
And I think following the president's speech, I suspect that changed everything, that you cannot let these guys go home just like that, because the president presumes them guilty.
Indeed.
And I'm like, wait a moment. Even if you look, let me say, if you look at the charge sheet now, you will laugh. My grandmother in the village will read the charge sheet and laugh. You know, the charges are ridiculous. I mean, you look at it and say, like, no, this can't be happening. So there's a problem here, and I think it has to do with the president trying to rewrite the Constitution, saying there's a presumption of guilt until you prove yourself innocent. He's basically reversing the law.
So what we are saying is not rule of law, but rule by law, Mr. Teguni.
Rule by law of the third degree.
I see.
In other words, of the worst possible kind.
Do you think the rearrest of Alan Sewanyana might actually have been influenced by the executive, the president himself, the UPDF, you know, swinging into action, rearresting Alan Sewanyana, and the fact that, you know, when you are in the general court martial, they can hold you until they want to release you. You cannot go out on bail. We saw that happen to the NUP supporters.
Romeo, I think you're asking answers instead of questions.
Indeed. I'm just there wallowing in the answers.
If you have questions, I'll answer them, but you're asking answers, basically, because that is exactly
what happened.
And this is a sad moment for our country, that we are seeing the executive, headed by the president, at clearly transgressing the basic tenets of constitutionalism. Of the articles of the Constitution, which are manifestly clear, which don't even need any interpretation of any kind. I mean, they speak for themselves. He's trying to rewrite them, basically to erase them from the Constitution. And to me, this is sad, and it must not go unchallenged.
But the president says that coming up with harsher punishments, like a death sentence for these suspects, would actually deter them from going on and hacking people left, right, and center. Just leave the NUP opposition in peace. But then there are other murder suspects who've been actually involved in these heinous crimes. And the president believes it should be an eye for an eye. If you kill someone, you should also be having the same fate coming to you.
You see, that is nothing new.
Isn't it a deterrent?
You see, first of all, the death penalty has always been on our books. and it has never deterred anybody from killing the other, in the sense of people who want to kill will kill you anyhow. Indeed. If they want you dead and they have the conscience, a seared conscience, or what the Bible calls a reprobate mind, they're going to kill you anyhow if they want you dead. So what the president therefore is saying is nothing new. The death penalty has always been on our books. He's not trying to introduce it. So it's there. And the sentencing guidelines as they stand today provide that somebody can be sentenced to death, but in those very rare cases, like where the court looks at the circumstances and says, no, 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 this is horrible, this is extreme, you really gotta die.
Mr. Tegole,
what they call the rarest of the rare circumstances.
Mr. Tegole, isn't this a complete orchestration of the political intolerance that is growing within this country? Not only are we saying we should be denying bail to murder suspects, we are also clamping down on members of civil society, NGOs, the shrinking civic space, and so forth. Talk about the political intolerance that is growing in this country.
You know, Romeo,
isn't it a reflection?
Romeo, today you're basically asking answers.
Let's swim in them.
That is, you're hitting the nail right on the head.
Indeed.
That's exactly how things are. And I'm concerned, I'm like, where is this all going to end? Indeed. Because it's clear the president, I mean, he's steadily eroding the civic space. He's steadily narrowing down the arena of political engagement. He's steadily clamping down on the position. He's steadily making it difficult for anybody to have an independent mind wherever they be. He's making it difficult even for the judges themselves to make independent decisions. He's making it clear that if he has put the country in his hand, he's going to squeeze anybody that tries to play cool and clever. And for me, I'm asking myself, where is this all going to end? This country is drifting down a steep slope at dangerous speed, and I can guarantee you we shall crash at some point. And this must not go unchallenged.
Gawaya Tegole, this will not go unchallenged, and indeed he is speaking with a lot of vehemence. We shall continue to engage him on this subject. Fiona Wall is here, ladies and gentlemen. She is the president of the Uganda Law Society. We want to get the legal perspective on what is actually transpiring within our country. The president's continued assault on the right to bail. Fiona Wall, the legal perspective. Is it constitutional what the president is doing?
It is, of course, unconstitutional. Maybe I'll start with saying I agree with where he's coming from.
All right.
The fact that sometimes bail has been abused because of corruption. We've had a lot of people taking the law into their hands because they feel that justice is not listening to them. However, I do not agree with his prescription. I do not agree that we should amend the Constitution. We need to remember that the Constitution does not exist in a vacuum. We're signatories to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and Article 11 talks about this, you know. Then we have I think it's the UN, the Convention on Human and Political Rights, and Article 14 talks about the right to bail. So we are signatories to these things. We have a higher burden of power away from just the law within Uganda. But secondly, we need to understand that it's not a right to bail, yes, it's a right to apply for bail. And the judiciary, one of the things that makes it independent is their discretion, their ability to practice their discretion. So to take away this is to take away their discretion as the judiciary. And that will be, should I say, belying everything we've been talking about. It will be undermining every effort we've been talking about. We have this judiciary administration bill that we've been celebrating, but then in the same breath we want to remove their discretion. The second thing that for me I find very troublesome is that the right to apply for bail is based on the presumption of innocence, and the presumption of innocence is a non-derogable right for any citizen of any democracy, unless we're saying that this is no longer a democracy. But we need people to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Now, we've had challenges. We've had the prosecution putting up charges like what I had Mr. Gawaya saying as I was coming in, and not being able to defend them, but then keeping somebody in that in that sense of uncertainty for 2-3 years, and they withdraw cases. You know, we've had, and yet the law is very clear that you should not keep certain people for on bail for, on remand for certain periods of time. You should be able to release them. I believe that we should not be, we have problems with our system. We have systemic problems. We have problems where torture is being used.
Indeed.
And it's compromising prosecutions. We have problems with pretrial detention. Right now, the prison population of Luzira is at 317% the capacity. That means that 217% of the people in there shouldn't be there. We don't have the capacity to do this. We're spending 2 million shillings per year on every prisoner. So why have people on remand for trumped up charges? Why have people on remand because the prosecution is unable to find evidence? Why have people on remand when they could be out on bail while living their lives? Because you see, one of the things that we've also realized is that the corruption has really messed up investigations in this place. So many times, many of the people that are actually arrested are not convicted at all. 40% of the prison population right now is on remand, are remandees. And of these, 40% of them, this was research that was released about 2-3 years ago. On the ones on remand, 40% of them have been on remand longer than the sentences they would have had they been convicted. And yet these people might not even be convicted, because if you take 5 years to try somebody, the evidence is lost, witnesses forget. So we have systemic issues. I don't think that the solution is amending the Constitution. I think the solution is to clean up our house. Let the systems work. Let's hold prosecution and police accountable for their behavior. No, seriously. I know that. I know.
Being drawn from his
yes, I know it's
likely begs to differ, but go ahead.
But I think that we should stick to.
Get his 2 cents.
The Constitution prescribes circumstances under which bail should be given, or should be given. We need to see the Parliament holding the judiciary accountable when they're not practicing this. Like I know that in Arua, I think we've had a situation where now we have about 200 prisoners who've been denied access to bail because, you know, the judge doesn't want to listen to that. And this is something that we're trying to deal with. But
so meaning there are some judges who side with the president, and there are those who are not siding with these kind of
it's judicial discretion. So there are some who believe in the death sentence, some don't believe in it, others do. But for as long as we have it dealt with responsibly, and I think the Chief Justice dealt with it yesterday very well. He said you have to deal with this discretion responsibly. Then Parliament can hold accountable those judicial officers that do not. And then we need to look at our systems. By the time I deny this person bail, is the file okay? Is everything fine for prosecution? Why don't we prosecute this person and let them go? Why do they have to be on remand endlessly? Otherwise, we stand a risk of having pretrial detention without trial. So just actually not even pretrial detention without trial.
What happened to Alan Sewanyana, Makindi West MP legislator that is on Thursday last week? He is released from Chigor prison and then rearrested by the UPDF, and not even the Uganda police that were actually mandated to do that. Well, legally, give us that perspective. Was it legal?
Well, the court has pronounced itself on the court martial.
Right.
And its ability to try civilians. Of course, I'm told the Attorney General is appealing. However, one of the things we need to realize that this is not the first court order we've gotten of the sort. The Uganda Law Society about 6 years ago got the same kind of ruling. This is a bad habit. This is now a bad habit of people trying to defeat somebody's right to bail, so not right to bail, but somebody's right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Because if a magistrate has seen it fit to give them bail, they have sureties. People have put their heads and accounts on the line to make sure that this person gets out while their trial is proceeding. Then you take them away. And you're not taking them away legally for another charge. You're taking them away in very strange circumstances. That is kidnap, and that is illegal. And the Uganda Law Society has severally abused this issue. But one of the things we'd like to see now is let's use the Human Rights Enforcement Act. Let's recognize these officers and see, let's put someone on trial and let's see them be denied bail. And maybe that's when people will understand what we're talking
President,
about.
The last time we tried to prosecute military officers, and that was the case of Nana and then Annette Namata. Now, Nana was beaten up at police headquarters in broad daylight when she had gone to see the Inspector General of Police. That was, I think, 2 years ago. At that time, it was, I think it was still, was Kehura out? I think it was Ochola. Now, she had an appointment with Afande Ochola for that morning. Now, when she goes there, she finds these guys lying in wait for her. They beat her up. She was heavily pregnant, 7 months pregnant, 5 months pregnant at that time. They beat her up, tear gassed her, pepper sprayed her, did everything. Eventually, she miscarried, lost her uterus. I mean, she basically just made it with her life. Now, we identify a couple of guys. We file a private prosecution. And what happened really broke my heart, that the Chief Magistrate of Nakawa, Dr. Douglas Ngeza, when he received our pleadings for private prosecution, even the moment they hit his desk, even without calling the lawyers to say, what is going on, or appear before me and I listen to you, he called the DPP, said, come and take over this case. And for me, I think this is where we're having a problem. That even members of the judiciary are either afraid or they have been co-opted onto the executive, that they are no longer doing even what the law basically requires of them.
They recuse themselves quickly.
It was a very simple thing. Call the lawyers, let them explain what the matter is. Because what we did was a very simple thing. We have identified a couple of officers. One was Mr. Rashid Ogeno, I think it's Rashid Ogeno. Well-known fellow. We said, Nana said, this is the man who was beating me up. There was another lady, somebody. We brought them, we said, this is the evidence, we have everything, put it before court. We said, we want to prosecute them. Without even calling us, the chief says, come and take over this case. I was like, what a moment. So we write to the High Court to say, this is anomalous, it is illegal, it is unknown to the law. And I think the High Court also looked at it and said, you know what, this is dangerous territory, we are not going there. I was like, there's a problem, Fiona, which you must admit, that the judiciary has been captured by the executive.
That explains the chuckle that came through from Gawaya when Fiona Wall was talking about the independence of institutions.
Because let me tell you something. We go to the court today.
Yes, Gawaya.
Only because, for the most part, we have where else can lawyers file their cases? But the truth is, we are also aware that many of the judicial officers have been taken over by State House. I suspect that they get calls from State House on matters that appear before them and get instructions there. By the time we come, so much has changed. You look at the verdict and say, like, what exactly has happened in this country? Which is why I'm saying there's a problem in this country. We have a choice either to fold our hands and cower on some corner, say we can't talk, this is the or we should look into the cameras and say, guys, we shall not be afraid, enough is enough. We want to challenge this as best we can, using all means at our disposal. We may not have the guns, but we still have our pens, we still have our mouths, we want to speak out, we want to write about it and say, whatever the president is doing, it is wrong for democracy, for human rights, for good governance.
And guess what? The pen is mightier than the gun. You're still watching Morning at NTV. I have Gawaya Tegule, a human rights activist, a journalist, if you will. We also do have Fiona Wall, the president of Uganda Law Society. We shall also return from this short break, talk about the Universal Periodic Review. Uganda, which shall be reviewed, that is in January of 2022. Are we making headway in terms of human rights? Staying with us right here on Morning at NTV. We are talking about the continued assault by the president on the right to bail. I do have Fiona Wall. She is the president of Uganda Law Society. Mr. Gawaya Tegule is also here. He's a human rights activist and also a journalist, if you will. We are still talking about the state of human rights within this country. Uganda will be reviewed in January of 2022. Yes, that is the Universal Periodic Review. But how have we been performing as far as human rights observations are concerned? When the president says he is actually calling for the removal of bail, isn't that a human rights violation in its its own regard. Go ahead, Tegule. Wouldn't you agree?
It is a human rights violation because with respect to my president, who by the way has done very well as the president of Law Society, and for that we appreciate you. And we shall not be afraid to say that you've done a good job so far. You've made us proud. You know, we are led by
That's
women.
high praise coming from Mr. Gawaya.
No, it's the fact. But we play fair. Where things are okay, we say it. If they're not okay, again, we shouldn't be afraid to say it.
Yes.
And I think, you know, we are led, ULS Law Society is led by women.
Yeah.
The president, the vice president, the secretary, the treasurer.
How does it make you feel, Mr. Gawaya?
They understand gender equity.
Yes, I mean, I think it's an exciting issue. I mean, it's an exciting
nice.
beat for us.
Yeah,
that,
and the president did borrow a leaf.
Yes, they're all ladies, and I think they're doing well. I think they're punching above their weight. If I speak with African eyes, in the sense that many times we think ladies are the weaker sex, as they say.
Misconception.
And, you know, yes, and they say, oh, but I think you've done very well, and I must congratulate you. And
thank you on behalf of my team.
What I can do as a man, a lady can do better.
Yes, I think. And let me tell you, if we had maybe a lady in charge of this country, maybe things would be a little different. There's a way ladies think and plan. I can guarantee you, maybe, just maybe, things would be a little different. And I'm not talking about Rebecca Kadaga, by the way. Make no mistake about that. Maybe a lady, not Rebecca Kadaga. Indeed. Yes, the former Speaker of Parliament.
Indeed.
Yeah, but the issue of bail is, and I don't agree with my president that it's not a right. I think my position is bail is a right in the sense that you are presumed innocent until you're proven guilty. Right. Only that it's not a it's a qualified right in the sense that it can be limited if the court thinks that it is not proper for you to enjoy bail at that time because of the circumstances around the case, then they can constrict that right just in as far as your going out is concerned. That is my position. And it may not agree with the the position of many judges, but I think that the moment the law says I am innocent, then it means I have a right to my liberty. Because again, Article 23, which addresses the issue of bail, says your liberty can be limited if there is, if the court proceedings is going on and it is necessary for you to be limited, or if you've been convicted and then, of course, therefore you lose the right to liberty. Indeed. But as long as I've not been convicted, I have a right to bail, but not an absolute right. I think it's qualified and can be constricted under Article 43, Clause 1. And again, Clause 2 must be also addressed that it should not go beyond what is necessary and demonstrably justifiable in a civilized state. Indeed. Now, what I think is that the president is attacking everything that seems to defy his authority. I think we're seeing a president trying to entrench himself. And what's his problem? He's 77, might even be 80 because he doesn't know when he was born. So as far as I'm concerned, what's the problem? What is the big deal? Shida kanini? Najauliza. I mean, if the law is clear about bail, then let us respect the law. If the president does not believe in the law, it's a simple thing. Let him abolish the constitution, right? Let him abolish parliament, right? Let him abolish all pretense to good governance. Let him decree himself president for life. Let him decree himself a monarchy, whatever it is, and we stop this playing around with the law because we're not getting anywhere, my dear friend Romeo. Indeed. I think let him come out and speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, because the truth is, the President, as I see him, has no regard for the concept of law except as it serves his interest. Let him speak, and we shall. I mean, we grew up in a Min's regime. Aren't we still alive today? Indeed. And Amin didn't pretend about it. We didn't have a parliament. We were okay. He did his decrees because it amounts to the same thing. That without a parliament, we saved spending on parliament under Amin. Right. There were no cars to buy. There were no salaries to pay for MPs. There was no inconvenience of going to committees. There was no one to bribe because we knew there's one authority in the country, and that is Idi Amin.
My correspondent, Rashul Adidi, who is on the line, ready to engage us. But then I would like to task ask you on the issue of the Universal Periodic Review. We underwent our first cycle in 2011, the second one in 2016, the third one is coming through 2022. So I want you to give us a situation analysis on how we are doing on as far as upholding of human rights is concerned. Are we making headway, or are you seeing regression? That's development coming in from Koboko. Well, young people should desist from such very, very risky activities. Well, reopening of schools is the only magic bullet that we are looking for. Well, those communities should clamor for the vaccination so that our learners go back to school, the safe haven, in the shortest time possible. We are still in studio talking about the continued assault on bail and also human rights violations that have taken center stage within the Pearl of Africa. I have Gaweta Gule and Fiona Wall. Gaweta Gule is actually explaining to us the progress that we've made as far as upholding of human rights is concerned. Gaweta Gule, have we made progress at least since 2016 during our second cycle review?
Can I amend your statement? I think you should have said, I'm explaining to you the progress that we have not made as far as human rights is or are concerned.
Go ahead.
Because I think we have seen the growth of institutions of state that are supposed to protect human rights. We have seen increased budgeting in terms of human rights from the donors and from the government in terms of supporting human rights institutions. We are seeing a lot of growth, institutional growth, in the sense of proliferation of institutions, both public and private, supposed to protect us, if you like, our human rights. But in real terms, in actual terms, if you're looking at the qualitative analysis of the human rights trajectory, I think I see a negation by far, because we're seeing a state that is determined to stamp down on every pretense to human rights, in as far as they relate to the right to think freely, the right to speak freely, the right to act freely, the right to good governance. Anything that touches the politics of this country then falls by the wayside, because the state is determined that nobody, and I mean except nobody, should stand in their way. I think the president and his team are determined to stay in power, to stay in controls. And if you talk about human rights going up, then it means the president and his team are going down. So there's no prizes for guessing what they are likely to do in a situation like that. They want to stay in power forever. And as long as human rights means, among other things, that it will shoot the government down, they're going to shoot human rights down as best they can, as quickly as they can, and whenever opportunity arises.
So as government consolidates power, human rights violations will continue unabated.
There is a nexus. It's diametrically, human rights are basically diametrically opposed to the continuance of Mr. Museveni and his team in power. So they really must go down if the president is to stay up.
Fiona, well, since our last cycle review in 2016, we've seen mass arrests taking center stage, people being held incommunicado. We've seen a lot being orchestrated within our country. You remember the November protests? Yeah, people getting shot, NUP supporters being held incommunicado. Don't you think all these factors put together shall paint a very, very bad picture for our country when we undergo our third cycle review in January of 2022? Literally, what progress are we making?
I think very little progress, I would say. I believe that sometimes as Ugandans we're very schizophrenic, we forget a lot. 6 months or 1 year to any election, we behave a certain way, we ask and make demands for certain things, and then immediately after, because I mean in 2016 we had a ruling that recommended, I don't even know why it made recommendations, there should have been orders on electoral reforms, for instance. That did not happen. I think that was a failing, and it was not a failing for just His Excellency, as Mr. Gawaya would like to say. It was a failing for Parliament, it was a failing for everybody who was involved, even we, the lawyers, for not making it happen. So
the electoral reforms,
we spent 2 years, almost 2 years, without a Human Rights Commission chairman. We spent almost 2 years without an IGG.
Meaning we couldn't investigate and hold these.
So issues of governance, issues of human rights, people did not have anywhere to go. And we also had the increased disrespect for due process. When you're arresting somebody, we saw kidnaps, we saw abductions, we saw the Minister of Internal Affairs stating that they had in their custody 170 170 people. I know that as Uganda Law Society, we got a task force and were able to trace 108 of those and represent them. But for me, what grieves me the most is that what we saw in 2021 was a result of us not acting on what had happened in 2016. And as a whole nation, the judiciary came through and gave those recommendations, but the Electoral Commission did not follow through. The government did not follow through, and civil society did not make sure that it followed through. It was actually about a year before elections that we started now agitating again. And I am grieved because this conversation has died again only 6 months after the elections. So I believe that as a country we need to stop being schizophrenic. We need to have a strategic direction and say this is where we're going. Where
the conversation has largely died courtesy of the state, courtesy of the government.
I wouldn't
the
say
narrative
that.
coming in from government was, because I remember very well, after the election, because they would call me and they were like, Romy Busiku would like to veer off away from the election and start talking about 2026. We don't want people to continue talking about the election and so forth.
So you are saying that the fourth estate is culpable in this as well?
No, really.
Yes, you are. Because if the fourth estate decides not to discuss something, then it's your fault that we're not discussing
We've continued, Fiona Wall. Then I told them we cannot stop talking about these conversations when you have NUP supporters in jail, when you have people who are still being held incommunicado. That conversation will not go away. Release the NUP supporters, give them clemency, and then we shan't talk about the election. We shall talk about 2026. Is that the reason why we are still here, Fiona Wall?
I have said I blame schizophrenia. On the part of all of us. I blame the security forces. It's when you just have this personality disorder that just brings out somebody else in certain circumstances. I think we change too quickly. I mean, you can just look at our social media and look at our attention span there. It's very hard for you, even as the fourth estate, to sustain issues because Ugandans move on very quickly, and that's a big problem because and this is very true. You know, it's very hard for you to keep something sustained until we get results, and everybody's taking advantage of that. Corrupt officials are taking advantage of that. The next year they're standing for office, you know. The people step out of jail and want certain things. So what I would like to see here, first of all, what has been consistent, where we've not learned, is our police respecting due process. The reason that we are even seeing bail being an issue here is because we've had a lot of people that are being taken without due process, and the magistrates just give them bail because they do not see what's happening. And yet, actually, the Human Rights Enforcement Act requires the magistrates to throw out these prosecutions if there's torture, if it's been procured in an illegal way. And so what has been, for me, consistent has been, one, the disrespect for due process in prosecution or investigations. Two, corruption. We've not won on corruption. It's gotten worse. In fact, with COVID-19, it sort of revealed everything that is dirty about us. I mean, we saw people keeping medical stores in their compounds, you know.
You have officials from the Lands Ministry who are now coming out to say,
we have stimulus packages. We do not know where they are. We do not know where the stimulus packages have gone. Traders are still saying that they still don't have access to the funding that was released for these people. We have hospitals, you know. We have hospitals that are conducting themselves criminally. Recently, the Uganda Law Society had got a ruling saying that, you know, the right to affordable health care is the responsibility of government, and government should regulate this. We've not seen the Ministry of Health do anything on this. Tobacco regulations. So for me, I look at the respect for the rule of law going down. We have a very serious lack of effort on the part of the ministries, on the part of the security agencies to actually enforce the law.
What do you make of civilians being tried in the General Court Martial?
This is something we've talked about since 2016. We've had rulings, and that's what I'll go to, that yes, we're talking about the independence of the judiciary, but nobody seems to respect court orders. Every time there's a court order, it's taken as a suggestion, and it's only enforced if it is to actually remove people's rights. So one of the things we've seen is especially in land issues. We keep saying that Vision 2040 is about economic development of this country. We cannot develop this country if people do not believe in a criminal and land justice system. Now, when we see people having court orders and their land is being taken away from them, we have court orders not to try people in the general court martial. The same police are the ones taking people there. So there's been a general respect for the rule of law, disrespect for the rule of law. There's been torture. Torture has taken on a new face in this era. We've had kidnaps. I don't know how to say this thing of drones that has grown. This has also become
They
a way
call
of
it preventive arrest.
You would call it that, but you see what you're doing is you're facilitating criminality, because anybody now with a drone will go and kidnap somebody and they'll say, oh, those are the security forces.
And of course,
or maybe that's a terrorist.
And of course the evidence gotten from such suspects cannot be adduced in court. But what makes, what is the fate of those individuals who actually fall into that bracket?
Yeah, so for me, the underlying thing...
They got evidence from me. It can't be used in court, but I'm still undergoing the same judicial process.
Exactly.
What is the fate of these individuals?
I think that we've failed them. The judiciary has failed these people. By entertaining a case where you know that the evidence was procured through torture, you're already breaking so many laws I can think of, even international conventions we've signed to. We have failed them as the prosecution. Why are you sanctioning? Actually, the Human Rights Enforcement Act starts with the prosecutors. Why are you sanctioning files? In the lockdown in May, 300 women and children in Gulu were arrested for selling food on the streets. It was not even an SOP that had been raised. It was not even a directive. There's no law they were breaking. They were arrested and taken to jail, and then 2 weeks later they are brought before a magistrate who insists each of them must pay 100,000 shillings, or else they go back. So the pictures we saw in the press were them being put back on the tracks because they'd failed to pay. I remember, I must applaud the DPP. I called the DPP and she went there herself and made sure that these women were released. But there was an officer there. There was a state prosecutor who prosecuted this case. There was somebody who sanctioned this file. There was a policeman who arrested these women. There was a judicial officer who insisted that they pay. You know, and this was a woman actually, you know. So it was very, we have failed. I believe that as Ugandans we need to take collective responsibility for the state of human rights right now, because we've all contributed.
All right, thank you very much, Fiona Wall, the president of Uganda Law Society. Gawaya Tegule, we did accept someone for the 3 recommendations as far as the Universal Periodic Review is concerned in 2016. We actually we deferred 18 and we rejected 65. One of the recommendations we rejected, it had an international convention on enforced disappearances. Government did not take that recommendation, meaning if we had accepted it or ratified it, these international partners would come to Uganda, go through all the safe houses to actually ascertain the state of people who are wallowing in conditions of squalor within these safe places. Now, was it deliberate on the part of government not to actually ratify this convention because they knew what they were doing? People were still being arrested or kidnapped, if you will. They knew the IGG was not there, so corrupt officials wouldn't be held to account. They knew the Uganda Human Rights Commission was not fully instituted. We could not have a tribunal investigate or hold those military officers to account. Now they actually ensure that they shrink the civic space. NGOs that were in the governance and accountability spheres, they made sure that they do not work ahead of the 2020-2021 election. Was this all a concerted effort to ensure that everyone is kept in the shadows or in the dark?
Romeo, I think one thing I like about you is that you obviously have a very good grasp of these issues.
Indeed.
You understand the dynamics, the political dynamics in the country, and which I think many journalists do not fully appreciate. And I would like to appreciate you and applaud you for that one.
Indeed, sir.
What you are doing is really hitting the nail on the head. What people should also understand is that Uganda risks becoming what we call a pariah state, or if you're American, a pariah state, an outcast at the table, at the high table of the international community, that at a certain, in the next few months, we shall not be welcome to sit at the table of civilized nations, because the things we do, the way we think, the way we act, the laws we are passing, the laws we are rejecting and refusing to enforce, all mean we can no longer be classified as a civilized state. I think we belong to the rogue table. We're becoming a rogue state for all intents and purposes. And let me tell you, right now, many people may think this, because it's working for them, there's nothing wrong with it. But I would like, and I saw I've seen many parliamentarians saying, if this is what Mosei wants, we shall support him. These laws, once amended and taken the wrong direction, have a tendency of backfiring against those who pass them. So if you're in parliament and at this point in time, you want to side with the president, let me tell you, you will soon be a victim of the very same laws that you pass. Like I said, Grace Ibingira, as we very well know, did pass a very stupid law, and he became one of its very first victims.
Gawayata Gule and Fiona Wall, thank you for having made the time to speak to us this beautiful Tuesday. This conversation is really contentious, and will help us shine a light on it. The viewers couldn't be appreciative of this fact. Fiona Wall and Gawayata Gule, thank you very much. We have Brigadier General, that is Flavia Biekwaso, who is also on the line. She's going to be talking to, that is Mr. Stephen Mbide, on the same subject, on enforced disappearances or kidnaps, if you will. Well, Mr. Mbide, take it away.